Welcome to another episode of the Devil's Rest Book Club, where we dive into the details of Christopher Rocchio's Sun Eater universe. I am your lowly Myrmidon, almost beating the gladiator, but just 1 second too short, gets shot with a crossbow and dies. Cameron, and with me always is the Palatine looking down upon me from his box and his privacy field, Drew. How are you doing, Drew?
I'm doing great, and today we're going to be covering chapters 44 through 46 of the first book of the series, Empire of Silence. It's getting real now. It's getting very real.
Give us a recap of what happened last episode.
Yeah, so last episode, we started off with continued conflict and not speaking between Hadrian and Switch, prolonging what would have been Hadrian's sort of growing friendship with Switch has turned into not even speaking terms. We move from there to Hadrian actually sneaking and meeting with this Yeltsin for the first time. We have this really crazy moment. He's accused of having a bad accent or not speaking well, speaking like a child by the Yeltsin. And then he's caught. And not just caught, he is found himself in the clutches of the Count of Emesh and is now very much in a bad situation. He has been discovered for who he is, what he is, and is sort of once again in a gilded cage like before, except worse in this position. So that's where our last episode left off, is with Hadrian in a new kind of prison.
And that's where we will begin chapter 44, Anais and Dorian. So because he is in a new gilded cage, he does have nicer rooming and board than he had in the Hypogeum for Collosso. So he begins looking at his new rooms, and he mentions, "My chambers fitted me like new teeth, my clothes like old snakeskin." So one, again, the idea that these Palatine regrow teeth is insane.
Yep. Still
so that's
crazy.
A feeling of like good, but the bad feeling is old snakeskin, right? This old life. I love the image of, well, now I'm back in palace. He's on the ziggurat now. He's living like in the palace, the Count's estates, and is back to life in court. And so he almost feels as if he's putting on this old life that doesn't fit him anymore. And we're going to see that. He wrestles with that basically the entirety of the chapters that we discussed today.
Yeah, very quickly. He doesn't even, at the outset here, doesn't even like to sleep in a bed. He's sort of still accommodated to this idea of sleeping on the floor, like he's still in Collosso with his buds and stuff. It's just, he's completely changed. He's become very uncomfortable in what he used to live in every day.
Yeah. Crazy, the idea that the bed feels so good that he can't ever get comfortable.
Yeah.
So he ends up just sleeping on the floor. And that's an indication of the kind of stuff that he has now. Even though it is a cage, it is a gilded cage. So he has luxuries that he did not have that weren't afforded to him when he was living the Myrmidon lifestyle or even on the street. So he also feels bad compared to when he was on Delos, when servants do things for him, right? He's now elevated to a spot where he doesn't get his own food. Part of it being a cage is like he is also monitored and doesn't get to run away, just like he had on Delos. But he feels wrong he's had this rugged individualism because he's had to survive on the street for so long, and then in Collosso, that now just asking somebody to grab food for him makes him feel strange. It sort of reverted everything that he knew from the Palatine perspective from his upbringing.
Yeah, I think it's made it difficult for him to really even tolerate it because it just feels so alien now. You can imagine so many years of living on the street or being under threat of death and stuff. You sort of grow to just be self-sufficient. So him being in this position now is just, it probably also feels very weird for him, just having left, being amongst his comrades, and now he's got like servants again. Like he sort of grew to be alienated by his Palatine identity really over the past several years. And now he's been treated this way again. It probably feels gross to him, the whole thing.
Guilt. There's definitely guilt there, right? The fact that his friends are potentially still in there and dying while he is safe. But at the same time, too, what the dominant thing that's going through his mind is the fact that his curiosity and his desire to understand this Yeltsin stripped away his ability to leave Emesh.
Yeah.
And he also is thinking about his friends a lot. Like he had this whole plan, like everything's screwed up. He doesn't even know how he's going to be able to communicate them to let them know that he's still alive. For all they know, he's gone. He's disappeared. Like he mentions the fact that somebody comes and gets his stuff from the Hypogeum.
Yeah.
And so there's no discussion on why that is. Like, did they just throw it out? Was it people from the palace. We don't get a picture on what life is like. And that puts us in a mood like Hadrian of like, well, what are they thinking? We have no idea what they're thinking.
Yeah. And especially in Switch's case, because Switch knows that Hadrian's Palatine, and Hadrian sort of is in this position now where he's like worried that, he just got in this big argument with Switch about how he wasn't like Palatine. And now it kind of looks like he got into this big argument and then just decided to leave like a Palatine. So it looks really bad, especially
from Switch's perspective, for sure.
Yeah, because like everyone else is probably just confused, but Switch is like, damn, dude, this guy actually was just playing Myrmidon, and then he got in an argument, and I called him out, and then he just like up and left and is doing Palatine stuff. So I mean, it looks terrible.
So as he is falling back into familiar patterns here in a palatial or Palatine environment, he mentions this, which I took exception with. My every move was watched, so I did what I'd been taught to do when observed. I behaved as expected. This is counter to everything that we know about Hadrian, at least in his life as a Palatine. Right?
Yeah.
This is one of those moments that we need to read and be like, there's a writer doing this that is kind of lying to us in this moment. Because everything we know about Hadrian being a Palatine is that he was not good at doing this. Like, he was constantly pushing back. He was, even though we saw the last straw of the succession game and him not becoming the Archon and going to be part of the Chantry.
Yeah.
He was a bull in a china shop when it came to politics. So he never behaved as he was expected to do.
Well, I think interestingly, if we're playing super crystal clear with the language, maybe it's the case that he was taught to behave when observed and just didn't. And so he has an option now to use what he's been taught to try to actually act in accordance with standards. Now that he's in a more dire situation, right? Like when he was on Delos and just at his house or whatever, just flagrantly breaking the rules. It's not because he didn't know how to behave. It's because he chose not to. And maybe now he's like, all right, listen, this is a different situation. Maybe I need to actually act the part this time.
Piggybacking on that too, I remember early on in the book when Gibson is saying, yo, you need to start packing your freaking bag, you idiot. At least pretend like you're going. Maybe that is what he's referring to, like when I learned this whole thing. Because at that moment in that part, like basically when the jig is already up and everybody already knows that the game is happening, is the moment that Gibson tells him, you need to start acting the part. And we know what happens in hindsight. But maybe he's thinking about that more than he's thinking about.
It's a good point. I didn't think of it. Maybe that is the way you learned it.
Yeah. So all that to say, we should be suspicious of when he says this kind of thing and look on the page and see if he is comparing how he is behaving in court compared to how he behaved in court in Dallas.
Yes.
He hears a knock at the door, and then it's just such a Palatine. Like, he just ignores it. He's like, if it's really important, they'll, that's just some Logothete or somebody, they'll go away. So he's just drawing a picture of the Borosito skyline while somebody's banging on his door. And so the door's locked at this point, but it opens and guards come in the room. They run a quick sweep. One pats him down, and Hadrian's probably like, oh, okay, so somebody serious is actually coming into the room. And in walks a handsome young woman and a flustered, slightly younger man who introduce themselves as Anais and Dorian Mataro, the heirs to Count Mataro's house.
Yeah.
So they are the children of Luther and Balian Mataro, and their complexion is mixed, is a mixture of their fathers. So they're copper-skinned, beautiful. They have Luther's shaped eyes, but Balian's hair, very, very Palatine-esque, of like a perfect blend of the two. He mentions the fact that he's kind of off guard in this situation and he doesn't bow. Unlike when he was in Collosso and had to like obey the forms, now that he is in Palatine digs, he does not bow like he should or treat them as the dominant people in this situation. So walking in, the woman, Anais, looks at him and says, "You're the one then? You're shorter than I expected." And this is not the first time that Hadrian has heard this. We've, as readers, have heard that he is short for a Palatine, but never has a Palatine told him that to his face in the book up until now. So we're getting confirmation that, despite the fact that he's 6'3", 6'4", something like that, very tall and taller than all the plebeians, that he is short for a Palatine. This sort of reminds me, did you ever watch Full Metal Alchemist or Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so like Edward Elric heard this so much of like, there's no way you're the Full Metal. You're too short, to be the Full Metal Alchemist.
Your reputation's like bigger than you. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the kind of vibe I get, right? I do wonder if there's a little bit of that in terms of him being shorter than average, if that's potentially a reference there.
Yeah.
Dorian, her younger brother, just immediately calls her out. It's like, yo, don't be so rude. Like, this is a, I try to be more polite, and then shakes Hadrian's hands and then says, we're to be friends, I understand. What kind of friendship have you ever started that's like, yeah, we're supposed to be friends, dude? And then you just shake hands. That's not how friendship works.
Probably not that way. Our introduction was kind of close to that. I shook
No,
hands.
it's different. No.
It's different. It is different, although I felt like it was destined. But it is like,
yes,
it is. This is like he's been like ordered to make friends with him or something like that. It's like
I get the vibe that he's a pet. Like they brought in this pet for these two kids to hang out with. Yeah. That's the vibe I get. Or like you ever had a parent with another parent when you're older and like you have all your friends. It's not when you're little. Like you can sort of, that's something I'm learning as a parent right now, is you can sort of control who they're friends with when they're little because they don't have any choice. They can't go anywhere. But like the moment that they get freedom to be able to choose what they do, what they're interested, what they're hanging out with, like that all goes out the window. Ours, I will take exception to that because we also went and had beer and we could have then just, like, we're not friends with other people's, you're not friends with other husbands from that group.
That's fair. That's fair. I just
choice.
I'm just remembering this moment shaking your hand outside the hospital. That was interesting. Yeah, just like
in the parking lot.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So yeah, definitely different though. Like it's like Hadrian's been talked up to him prior to them meeting, essentially, and like this is sort of like a manufactured meeting, like
there's
something interesting. Yeah.
Something's happening here, and that's what we've heard ostensibly from Bailey and Mataro. Like there's not a lot of people their age that they get to hang out with.
Yep.
And we understand that based on Hadrian's experience.
Yep.
That's true. Like the majority of the people that they interact with are servants or their parents, right? Like it's like servants' parents or other,
tutors,
political tutors, that kind of thing. There shouldn't be a ton of like peers that they deal with. Hadrian mentions that he feels as if they are children, despite the fact that he's only biologically like 2, maybe 3 years older than them. So I think Dorian's going to be like 21-ish for his Ephebia, and he's only 23, right? 23, 24-ish. So he's like kind of looking down on them, but the time that he had on the streets did mature him a lot, and he feels totally different. So long as I had been amongst the plebeians, he says, I did not find it strange that the son of a Palatine lord would deign to touch my hand. So he mentions the fact that even in this greeting that Dorian has with him in this moment, this is abnormal. Like, this is not how normally Palatines would meet. There's probably forms and obeyances that you go through. The fact that this guy came up and just shook my hand strikes Hadrian as strange, despite the fact we don't know if they know that he's Palatine yet, right? Presumably, the guise that Hadrian is wearing is not that of a Palatine. It's of a patrician or plutocrat or something like that.
It's also got to just be like this really strange experience to be on the street, not able to like enter normal establishments and stuff, and now you're shaking hands with the heir of Emesh. Like just the contrast between those experiences is extreme, to say the least.
Hadrian then goes on an internal monologue talking about the fact that, I'd forgotten how much I have to put a mask on at court.
Yeah.
So this is an indication that he is learning, because we didn't see a lot of mask for Hadrian, at least in his experience on Delos. He also throws in this little drip-fed world-building thing about the fact that on Jadd, the courtiers do wear physical masks so that you can't really see their expressions as well. So, like, he wishes that almost he was on Jadd so that he could have a physical mask that's hiding his emotions, potentially.
Well I think it's
awesome.
It's also like this interesting thing where it's sort of court necessitates a falsehood of sense, like a performance because of the station that's associated with all the different people. And it sounds like, interestingly, on Jadd, it's like there's like an acceptance of that dynamic in a more genuine way. If you just wear the mask legitimately, rather than pretending like we're all being our real selves, we're just going to be the office, right? We're not going to like do I'm going to pretend to like you and do this thing. Like I'm going to put the mask on and we're all like not pretending. We know what's going on because we're doing the genuine thing. That's an interesting comment by him. I hadn't thought about it like this before, but it makes sense that like just over there, at least they're genuine about it. Over here, we pretend we're not doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just as a note on the names, Dorian, The name can be interpreted as like a big gift or a good gift. Also of the sea. It's an ancient name for certain Greek tribes. And the origin of the Hellenistic states, like there are Dorian tribes that fall under that umbrella. Anais means grace, favor, or merciful. There are a few potential derivations for the name itself and how it's written. It's potentially derived from the name Hannah in the Bible, who is the barren mother of the prophet Samuel, who eventually gives birth to Samuel. It's also potentially a derivation of Anahita, which is Persian for pure or immaculate or unblemished. It's also the name of goddess in Zoroastrianism, who is the divinity of the waters and thus associated with fertility and healing. These names are chosen with a purpose.
Yeah, it's interesting that Dorian is gift when the Cielson is going to be a gift to him at his triumph here.
That is interesting.
Interesting choice here. And Anais, how do you pronounce this? How does audiobook pronounce it? Is it Aeneas?
Anais is how the audiobook pronounces it. I think it's actually Anais.
And Anais, okay, interesting.
Because the umlaut above the I is like a double.
Yeah,
so picture two eyes being there.
Yeah, Anais, yeah. So she introduces herself, and there's this interesting moment where they are like sort of greeting each other, and there's this great passage that I felt was worth reading. As he's being greeted, Hadrian's being greeted, brief images flash in the space of my mind behind my smile. Cat coughing in the storm drain, a knife buried in the shoulder of a store clerk, the cruel laughter of the other boys at night, of the Colosseum and the friends I still had there, the friends I had abandoned there. Welcome to Borisivo, indeed. Ladyship, I know Borisivo in ways that you will never will. There's this interesting, I think, growing sense over the course of this section of the story of the way that his experience on Borisivo has shaped him and how it's sort of almost permanently separated him in this way from these people. You know, he used to be around these people, but it's like as he interacts with people now, he can no longer, to use a choice of words to be flamboyant here, it's no longer like distant thunder, the experience that they stand upon. He has memories flashing of what the structure upholds as he sits in it with the people, because he was literally on the street. He was in Collosso watching the people die that were his friends. It is not hypothetical for him anymore, what this whole system looks like. And so you sort of can't separate them. You sort of need a blindness to be able to participate in it. Maybe a moral silence, we'll say. And he's no longer has the ability to do it.
And I mean, he does think of himself as Sid Arthur, right? So
yeah,
of course he would think that internally, but let's see how that compares to the way that he behaves, at least in his gilded cage.
That's right.
Hadrian then asks why they are here. He's put his, proverbial mask on. And the entire time they are like measuring him up. They're looking him up and down. They're trying to get his vibe. Hadrian notes that he cannot physically look at Anais because she's so beautiful. So because he's been and spending so much time with plebeians and some patricians, the fact that she is like full high college Palatine beauty shocks him. Like it's almost like she's too radiant. I have to avert my eyes. I can't look at her for too long. Otherwise I get, my eyes get hurt. And I wanted to read one part of it on page 298. Anais Mataro, radiant as a bronze statue, dark as a summer's eve, the personification of the icon of beauty herself, and a cool, calculating opportunist. Not knowing this at the time, I smiled, wearing the face of the Count had asked me to wear. I was a Myrmidon, ladyship, one of the fodder fighters. She asks him if he was a gladiator, and then she mentions the fact. But this gives us a really interesting picture, and if we're looking very closely, the statement, and a cool, calculating opportunist, not knowing this at the time, I smiled. So we need to be very careful about the way that we look at Anais going forward, because she is more than meets the eye. She is not just this beautiful heir to the Mataro fortune. She's not just this Palatine lady. She is much more, and she is more than she initially seems. So we have to be really, really careful around her.
There's an interesting point here as well. Earlier in the story, we had this person named Valka mentioned, and this person, Valka, is name dropped here again, where it says he's talking about how Palatine just look too perfect, and he's not used to this. And he says that Valka once said, "I had the sort of face one saw in marble." And thinking of the statues in our necropolis, I could not say I disagreed, but I was one of the charcoal sketches compared to the oil pointing that was Anais Mataro. It's again this Valka person is mentioned, commenting on Hadrian's appearance. So this is the second or third time that this name's been dropped in the story thus far. It's interesting that keeps getting dropped without more information about this person.
Yeah. Dorian, upon hearing that Hadrian is a Myrmidon, remarks about, wait, you're that one Myrmidon that, used the sand to get the guy, recounts an event that Hadrian had when he was in Collosso as he sits down in this chair and throws his leg over it, which Hadrian sees and is like, that reminds me of somebody. I don't know what it reminds me of, but it reminds me of somebody. And we'll find out later who it is. Initially, I was like, who is he referring to? I don't know where the connection is. And so I spent an inordinate amount of time thinking about it. Later in the chapter, he just tells us. So we'll pull that pin really soon.
I was like, which Greek statue is Rockio referring to? And it's just...
See, that's the thing. When you have to look... dude, there's too much. You can get down a lot of rabbit holes.
Yeah, no kidding.
Which I'm sure our listeners are familiar with at this point if they've listened to this many episodes. After Dorian talks with him a little bit about his tactics in the Colosseum, he basically begins probing Hadrian's languages, particularly Jaddian, right?
Yeah.
Presumably in this alibi that the reason Hadrian is here is because he's accompanying some, Jaddian material here on a merchant, like his father's a wealthy merchant or whatever. So Dorian begins testing his Jaddian, giving him a little phrase intentionally wrong to see if Hadrian will correct him. And Hadrian does do that and correct Dorian in a way that he even remarks, I probably shouldn't have done it that way. It was a little bit too familiar. And then, of course, Dorian's like, oh, yes, of course. So that indicates to me at this point, so Dorian and Anais are feeling Hadrian out. They're trying to understand him. They're examining him. They're testing him. Hadrian even mentions it. Like, I was a sample on a slide, a morsel on a dish. He mentions Kyra again. It says, this must be how it felt to have been Kyra in certain situations with me back on the day. So he feels objectified or overly scrutinized in a way that he has not before. And because they're in his chambers and they saw that he has a drawing on, he gets asked about it. He's trying not to be upset with the fact that they're just invading his privacy and touching all his stuff, but he can't help it, right?
Doesn't she drop his pencils or something like that? It's just just making a mess of the whole place. It's
She drew up the sheaf of cheap paper the Chamberlain would give me. I clenched my teeth, biting back in inopportune demand, right? He's just his spit. There is no space for him anymore. He has no privacy. But strangely, in this moment, he's acting the most Scholiast that he's been the entire time. He's having to actively practice the apatheia, right?
Yeah.
I thought about that, and it's he's having to suppress his emotions to put the mask on.
Yeah.
Sort of a mirror image of he wanted to be a Scholiast so bad. This is the most Scholiast thing that he's gotten the opportunity to do so far.
Yeah. Old Hadrian would have hit her in the head with a book or something like that. But right now he's just gritting his teeth and bearing it, right? It's a weird kind of growth, but it's growth. It's growth for Hadrian that he's trying at least to act his position here.
Yeah. It also shows that he's more self-aware, at least now, than he was back when I guess he had. Maybe it's a power dynamic thing that he had the ability to get away with more. Now that he doesn't have the ability to get away with more, he is actually having to pay attention to the rules.
Yeah, I think
so than he did in Delos.
Well, I mean, when you experience genuine risk and danger, you probably have an increased risk sensitivity, right? So, maybe because he was on his own planet with his own house, maybe he felt entitled to act the way he was previously. But ultimately, because nothing that bad really happened to him until things started really going wrong all of a sudden. So maybe he just has a more acute awareness of how bad things can get. And so he's just being a little bit more cautious after having learned some harsh lessons. It probably is at least a part of the math here in terms of trying to behave.
That's fair. I actually really appreciate this new Hadrian to some extent because he seems more mature and he's making a point to tell us that he's more mature.
Yeah.
But we feel the snakeskin off of him, right? He is a different guy than when he was
Yeah.
Hadrian, the son of the Archon. Anais grabs this picture that he's been drawing of Borsevo's skyline, and he mentions the fact that his picture of Borsevo accentuates the dying sun in the background and the shadows of the different things. It's very dark, grotesque. You get a very visual picture of this, very dark drawing initially.
Yeah.
And Anais makes the point to say that it's beautiful. This is very clear to me that like they're putting it on so much because this is not a beautiful picture. He mentions the fact that it's not a flattering picture of Borsiva at all, but she says it's beautiful. I don't think this is like one of those things like, oh, she likes dark things. I think this is buttering him up. She's being really, they're being strange. Dorian like immediately asks after the fact, like, you should draw one of us. And Hadrian sort of like awkwardly pauses. Oh, how am I supposed to respond in this situation? He's like, sure, I will. And Dorian's like, oh, not right now. Of course, like
Right.
later. We'll set up
Right.
some time later. But you're a good artist. You should draw us. Hadrian then pulls the, it's been a long day.
Yeah.
Really trying to subtly dance around. He can't really make any requests of them. So he's like, oh, I've been up for 13 hours. He's trying to in some way get them to realize, hey, I want to be alone without telling them that because he can't do it. And they do not get the message at all. They just like, or if they get the message, they just ignore it.
Once again, a subtlety he wouldn't have previously had.
Yeah. I think power has to, it doesn't have to be one or the other. Power could definitely play into it. And also this newfound risk aversion that you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's probably both.
Yeah.
But internally, he doesn't really have that because he just then notes the fact that like, he's getting a good look at Dorian for the first time and notices that he's got this pencil thin beard on his chin and remarks to the fact that Palatine, where he comes from, get their facial hair permanently removed. So Hadrian couldn't grow a beard
if he wanted to,
without some genetic modification.
Something I will note here that is interesting as we see more subtlety from Hadrian is that the thing that's going to separate Hadrian from the scholiasts here is that Hadrian, because we can see in Hadrian's head, we can tell that Hadrian isn't really managing his emotions. He's sort of suppressing them. And the reason we can tell that is because a scholiast or a stoic or whatever, when these people are sort of like mirror images of stoics in some sense, they would try to manage their expectations and thought process so they didn't feel the emotions that would drive an impulsive or irritated response. Hadrian is sort of gritting his teeth in his anger. He's not thinking differently or trying to measure it. He's just trying to not express it. And that strategy is actually in some sense a losing strategy because it typically results in sort of like a boiling over moment because you could only suppress and accumulate so much negative emotion before it starts to leak out in either passive aggression or sort of like an explosion of emotion. So he's almost like he's like appearing more scholiast-ish because he's not doing the expression, but he's not actually truly acting as a scholiast in the sense that he is still experiencing the emotions. He's just not quite showing them yet. So we'll see how that plays out as time goes by, about like if he's able to continually suppress the frustration and anger he's having with the situation, but he's not truly not experiencing it in a way a scholiast really would if they had mastered their emotions and managing them well.
That's a fair point. And we see it even when he's looking at the subtle comments that he makes in his internal monologue. The fact that like, I think this guy looked ridiculous. Like his facial hair was dumb. So narrator Hadrian is inputting that into the story. A long time from now. So we can imagine that this vibe or this feeling has perpetuated throughout that time period. He hasn't really dealt with the negative emotion that he had in this situation, like you mentioned.
The thoughts he's having are driving up the negative emotion of the situation, right?
Yeah.
The thoughts you have amplify. So this would be a negative situation rationally, but if you continue to be more and more upset, and you're making you more upset with the way you're thinking about it, then you got to measure the actual thought process you're having. If we're taking the scholiast stance, right? Yeah, so we'll see how it works out.
They invite Hadrian to come and meet their friends, the people at court. They want him to be among peers to some extent, right? Of course, nobody is their peer because they are the highest of the high on their planet. And so unless somebody else comes in, everybody is technically below them. But at least the people that they hang out with and socialize with on a normal basis. He mentions they held me in spotlights, pinning me as surely as the sight of a sniper's rangefinder. So he feels like the whole feeling this entire chapter is I'm under examination for something. I don't know what it is, but I'm under examination and this isn't normal. Old Hadrian would behave potentially differently, but this current Hadrian is playing along because it is expected of him, and he says that he'll agree to go. He also mentions that he wasn't certain that the Count was keeping him around for my language acumen alone, just as I wasn't certain he'd bought my line about being able to protect him from the Chantry. So he is hinting at very clearly here that there are some other machinations potentially. Like, I don't know. I don't necessarily believe Balian is just keeping, like, they could hire a scholiast for that. I'm a liability, but I'm also dangerous because the Chantry is here. But this guy, already mentioned, like, you could have killed me in the last chapter. At the end of the last episode, so that's the smartest thing to do is just off me right now and just dispose of my body. I was never here, right? So we can assume at this point, based on the way there's machinations that are happening above Hadrian that we're not really keyed into at this point, but Hadrian feels them in the moment. He doesn't feel settled. Like, it's not just a gilded cage he's in. He's being kept in a cage for a particular purpose.
Yeah, and he's being prodded while he's in there, right? Like, it's something strange is happening that isn't immediately apparent, but is sort of like in the subtext of everything that's going on.
He makes it a point to mention here, I was acutely aware that I was back in a world of wheels and spirals, a place where nothing was straight, contradance and contrafeint. Once I had excelled in such waters. Now I was not so sure I even had gills. So this is talking to me not about his time on the dueling court, but rather in court itself and how to deal with situations and machinations or whatever. But it's interesting to me that the narrator thought that he was good at this at Delos, because he's not. Like, he was bad at this on Delos, and he's better now than he was back then. But he feels less off-put now purely because he's in a different situation where he's not the one in charge.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? He was not good at this dance, counter dance. Like, he messed up so bad 4 times in a row on Delos. It wasn't just like one little issue. It was back to back to back to back errors that got him put in the position that he was in.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting point. Maybe it's self-inflated or poor self-awareness, or maybe, who knows, maybe he genuinely was better at managing court politics before the point in the story at which Hadrian introduces us to himself, because that's sort of the breaking point, and maybe he starts to misbehave a little bit more than usual because he's just fed up and wants something different or something. But at least what we've seen on the page where he decided to show his account, he was kind of a bull in a china shop back at Delos. That is accurate. And regardless of his capacity to know how to behave, like we discussed earlier, he certainly wasn't doing so. He wasn't displaying it very well. Although he had some minor machinations that went okay, it wasn't elegant or anything like that.
They ended up losing, right? He barely got out of there.
Yeah.
So just a note I wanted to make. We need to watch him here, because this Hadrian already is performing better than what we've seen him in a courtly setting yet. But we really need to look at him when he actually enters into court.
Yeah.
Finally, Hadrian is able to recognize where this leg over the chair behavior, the swagger, has triggered his memory. Dorian Mataro reminds him of Crispin. He's just full of swagger. He owns the place. Nothing could possibly go wrong. And this is strange again, and points us back to the fact that Hadrian doesn't have an accurate view of Crispin, because Dorian Mataro has been the polite one in this situation, right?
Yeah.
He's the one that's like, don't be so mean, sister. Like, how would you do that? Like, puts him on a level playing field and shakes his hand, is like genuinely interested in who he is. But just the fact that he has this vibe about him that reminds him of Crispin, he immediately lumps him in with, this guy must be a Crispin. He must be this perception that I have of my brother that we as readers don't necessarily recognize as potentially the truth.
And, it gets even worse than that, because he says, he's not like Crispin in one way. He at least liked Collosso for the sport, and Crispin just liked it for the blood. And I'm like,
how do you know that?
And
how can you attribute that?
And you're like, brother. I think it's interesting, because I think what we're sort of seeing here is that it's almost like Hadrian doesn't even just have a bias against Crispin. He has a bias against this archetype, right? Like, against this type of a person. It's almost like he's skeptical of this sort of princely guy who seems brawny or confident or something like that. There's something about it that just sort of is, I don't know if it's just the difference from Hadrian and how he's this sort of brooding, smaller, more intellectual guy. He doesn't like that archetype. It rubs him the wrong way. He's skeptical of it. And I think it distorts his view, frankly. We've seen it happen twice here. It's a blind spot for him. For all of Crispin's faults, he's casting him as like a psychopath right now. And it seems like maybe Crispin is ignorant. Maybe that's possible, but psychopath, that's a pretty strong accusation. So I think it has to do with the type. I think Hadrian's just got a blind spot. I think that something about this type of a person rubs Hadrian the wrong way. And so he distorts what they're actually like. It's probably a flaw of his.
Something that we should keep an eye on as we move forward. So anytime Crispin comes on the page later, we need to beep, beep, boop, beep, and figure out if Hadrian's actually looking at the situation with
Listen, all I'm saying is if we end up doing the Lesser Devil, episode 1 will have to be called The Case for Crispin, episode 1. We'll see. We
are doing the Lesser Devil
we'll
immediately after this. Rest assured.
Yeah.
Let's get through this first, but we can definitely do that.
Yeah.
But to the point, he is getting better at court politics. His mask is getting better. He doesn't let any of this betray the way he's actually feeling. And as this chapter ends, he wonders what it's like watching Collosso from the box, as he has not done that since his failure on Delos. And that's where we begin chapter 45, Lose the Stars. And Hadrian immediately jumps to the moment that he is back in the box in Collosso. And he remarks about the fact that he can't remember any of the conversations he had with anybody else, barely remembers anybody else at the party other than Dorian and Anais. He does remark at a few of the myrmidons that he's looking at, right? So his perception has changed, right? Where everybody else is probably looking at the Matara Sphinxes, remarking, oh yeah, this season he's got 5 kills or whatever, He's looking at the myrmidons that he fought with. He names 3 of them, Light, Alice, and Urdro. Urdro fought with him on that first day, he mentions, and is this guy that is super fit. He eats super well. He trains really hard, and he does all the right things that you would expect that you could potentially do to increase your survival rate in the Colossus. Doing everything right. And the first thing that we see in the action with the Myrmidons and Gladiators is Urdro gets shot with a crossbow by Jaffa. And Urdro dies, and other Myrmidons swarm the Gladiator and knock him out. The Gladiator would leave with bruises, and despite the fact that he lost the match or whatever, Urdro doesn't get to go out of there living. So despite all of the work that Urdro put in, he dies.
Interestingly, is this the second time Jaffa has been mentioned to kill one of their group? So Jaffa, for some reason, I think previously was mentioned to have killed, I think it may have been in one of our time jumps, is one of the people that he had fought alongside Jaffa. I think it was Jaffa that killed the last person.
Jaffa's been mentioned 2 or 3 times. Yeah. And has been mentioned particularly as dangerous because he uses projectile weapons and not like javelins and other things that he's going to try and pick you off from a range. Yeah. Polino mentions that. I think, the one guy that ended up following Hadrian, his name starts with a B, I can't remember. I think he dies as well to Jaffa's hand. So Jaffa is good at killing myrmidons. Yeah. Hadrian, upon seeing Urdro die, just is I don't want to be here anymore, man. This is awful. And so he feels the same way. Hadrian has not changed so much that he feels differently in being on this end of Collosso like he was on Delos. But he also recognizes that was a failure of his, and he has to keep up appearances so he can't just immediately leave. But what he does in Urdro's honor, seeing him die, is he takes a full cup of wine and sets it on the rail. And every time somebody comes and tries to pick it up, he just waves them.
Once again, growth, behaving differently, even though he is frankly disgusted by what's happening. He's not storming out in a way that started this whole adventure.
Yeah. He recognizes that was a failure on his part.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that he cannot leave, Anais and Dorian are because this is a courtly event, they're in a box. I'll speak from experience. My parents worked at a large company that had sponsored a bunch of sports events. And so they had rented boxes at games and things like that, like a baseball game. So imagine going into the suite. They have it's all catered. You're meeting a bunch of these people, whatever. That's the vibe I get in this situation. This is the best seat in the house. It's the count seat. So there's also this social, it's more of a social thing and a business thing than it is watching Collosso. Collosso, you can look down and you can have a bite to eat and, oh, that's interesting and entertaining. But the primary purpose of this situation is for politics and for business. And so they're parading him around in this situation, you know, like introducing him to all these palatines and these patricians. He mentions that Anais is particularly close. She's like on his arm the entire night. She's plowing him with drinks. Like she's just constantly pushing him to drink more, and it kind of works because not only is she beautiful, but she's also charming. Like he mentions the fact that this is a very charming young lady, and she's the queen of the ball, and she's the prettiest girl in town, and she's trying to get me drunk. So why wouldn't I get a little drunk? I love how it turns out for him though, because then he just is like gets asked about it comes out in the moment that like, oh, he's a pit fighter, he fought with the Myrmidons, and so you can imagine that all he fought with, you know, all this different stuff, people
Yeah.
recounting his battles to him, asking, where did you learn to fight this and all this different stuff, and he can just lie at this point because I mean, he's already living under an alibi. He can't truthfully tell them, oh, I was trained by my father's, you know,
Right.
right-hand man and military expert and legionnaire for, oh, I don't know, 20 years of my life where I practiced every single day against larger opponents. He can't say that. So he's like, yeah, I learned swordplay from a Jetty and Myskolos, I got beat up by these thugs in the Bellows in Borisiva, recounting a tale that actually happened to him on Delos, but just transporting and changing the venue.
It's hilarious.
He remarks at the fact that like he loves it. They love it because he likes the attention because he's melodramatic, but they love it because it's a voyeuristic thing for them. Like they'll never experience
Yeah.
that sort of like the only reason that Hadrian experienced that is because he went outside of the boundaries of what he should have done as a palatine. And they're not going to do that, or a patrician or whatever. They're never going to get mugged like that. And so they're just fascinated with the scenario. He also mentions that where we get the name of the chapter too, that despite all of what's going on right now and being chained by politeness, he knew that he had lost the star. So he's morose and lamenting the fact that his curiosity got the better of him. He wouldn't be put in this situation, in this box, in this moment, had he not been curious about the Cielsen. It killed his opportunity to leave. And that sort of keys us into the next part of the conversation where Dorian, his friend Melandra, who's this patrician young lady and potentially his lover, they're like kind of buddy and close, asks him if, hey, I heard this rumor that there's a Cielsen that you're going to, end up killing for your Euphebia.
Yeah.
And Dorian plays coy. He's like, no, I can't talk about the Euphebia. My dad's going to punish me. He'll throw me in the stocks. He'll throw me in a gibbet if I tell anybody about it, but I'm totally going to kill Cielsen, guys. Like, it's just so, I don't know, high school. It's a very high school way of talking about things.
Yeah.
And then like the people start asking like, how did you even get a Cielsen? This is crazy. So you can assume that the Cielsen, at least on Emesh, is being part of a Euphebia is a rare thing. Like this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Other people have different events for their Euphebia.
It's surprising. And it also shows, I think, that we know rumors were kind of spreading like wildfire amongst the Myrmidons. It sounds like this is exactly the same case with the Palatine, right? Like rumors are probably across the whole city about this situation. It's just like, what are they keeping in the dungeon in Collosso? Because
this tells me the Federati are terrible secret keepers. They cannot keep a secret to save their lives, because that's got to be where this is coming out.
Well, I mean, Hadrian finds out in Collosso from people being blabbermouths about how they
but they're Federati too, right? There's the same guys.
Yeah.
This company, don't hire White Horse. If you're trying to get your secret business done, you don't hire these guys. These guys suck at keeping a secret.
That's right.
So, they even know directly how it came to happen, because Anais is like, yeah, Gilliam Voss, he bought it from them Federati that came in town. The Legion Federati that were like on contract or whatever. They had a bunch of them in the hold. He just bought one. And Melandra's like, oh, that gargoyle or whatever. At this moment, Hadrian's like, I need to let you know, reader, in this moment, that the Palatine are terrified of Intises, or Inti, as he mentioned here, because like they know that they're one mistake away from being, right? Inti are created when two Palatines go through an unsanctioned birthing process or whatever. They try and actually have to naturally have a kid. It keeps us connected to the emperor. And so like anytime that they exist, they are a threat and they're outside of the intent of the empire. And so they are seen and looked down upon. So the fact that she calls him a gargoyle is telling of the situation of like how intices are dealt with, or inti are dealt with across the Palatine class.
It's it's interesting. There's like this psychological hatred for their own inferiority in a sense, right? Because because them, right? If they don't do things in a particular way that they don't have control over, right? So it's almost as if the disgust of the reminder of their own nature is then directed all at the Antis itself, right? So they have like this or sort of underlying fear and inferiority about this thing that then gets projected and thrown at the object of it. So like they sort of
the collective unconscious in this moment is like throwing that on the Antis, because if they don't, they have to reckon with the fact that they're born in a particular way that seems wrong.
Right. It's to not other that would mean that they have to accept it as a part of themselves. And so they must, in order to psychologically tolerate this sort of fake superiority that they really don't have, because this is literally them. They have to excise it and pretend like it's lesser and not exactly what they're only capable of producing. Yeah. So it's essentially a mirror that they can't tolerate, so they shatter it. That's what my take is on it.
That's fascinating. And it echoes exactly what Hadrian mentions here and his reaction to Saltus's words, right?
Yes.
When he mentions the fact that both of them are homunculi, both of them were being born in the vats. He mentions it on the page here that Saltus, like that's in the moment what he's thinking about. So even though we had gotten the vibe from narrator Hadrian early on in the story about the narrator having a different perspective on natural birth versus the way that the Palatines do things, and the way that plebeians deal with family compared to the Palatine familial structure, Hadrian in this moment is feeling these feelings as well, not just the narrator. So we're already seeing a reckoning or a changing in Hadrian's ethics as it regards to the way the Palatines are halfway through book number 1.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, Hadrian had a really intense reaction to Gilliam when he first met him. I think there's something that's a little bit enlightening about seeing these folks talk about him in a different context. And it's sort of echoing in sort of the same way that, like you said, Saltus almost planted a seed in the same way that Crow plants a seed for him. And now this is starting to grow a little bit for him based on what Saltus said, is like, you know what? There's some strangeness associated with the fact that we're calling our own product gargoyle because this is literally the only thing we can produce without the blessing of the emperor or something like that. I mean, it's like, it is very weird, so like he is sort of slowly having his mind changed by that sort of seed that was planted. I heard a guy say one time, as this apologist guy said, that the way you change people's minds is not in the moment. You want to be like a rock in someone's shoe, where like as they walk around and they experience things, it sort of claws a little bit and is like slightly uncomfortable, and it sort of grows until they take the shoe off and they have to shake the shoe out, basically. So it's like Saltus really got to him in a way that actually opened him up into considering something different, I think, interestingly.
Yeah. Hadrian then wanders back to the glass that he left Erdro on the rail to try and get away from the situation. He waves the servant away from taking it, remarks at the fact that, like, that was too familiar of me to be doing that. I don't know how I feel about that. He begins watching this Eudoran group of mummers play this play, Cyrus the Fool. Eudorans are interstellar wanderers from Europa. We can assume that Europa is the moon from Jupiter, right? So these people have a long history of traveling and wandering, but they're basically the gypsies or the Romani people of the empire, essentially. Eudora is a Nerad who gave great gifts in Greek mythology, and so that's where he gets the name from. The play Cyrus the Fool is a mention and a callback to Cyrus the Golden that Switch mentioned previously about wanting to be one of these like sword fighters like these people. So Cyrus the Fool is a retelling of the story of Prince Cyrus the Golden, who is a Jaddian prince, and his life story in this sort of way that it is looked down upon, you can imagine, in the Imperium. So we'll figure out more about that as we get further into the narrative. He remarks that the play is pretty good. His mom would approve if they weren't for the fact that they were made by Eudorans, because she doesn't like those. She doesn't trust those Eudorans. Still some racism there. But he's still brooding over in the corner with this glass of wine, and he's looking down at Erdro as he's being dragged off by a by an Umand, and Anais like walks up behind him and startles him, says, "Did you know him?" He like jumps back, like looks for a knife to grab, It's just this cat that you don't want to scare. And she spills wine on the floor, and he makes a note of this. "Red as the ink with which I write this account."
Oh, interesting. I didn't catch that. That's cool.
He was writing this in red ink. And I had to think a lot about why. Why is he writing this in red ink? Do you have any theories? I think I know the real answer.
I have no idea.
Well, red, there's a bunch of potential reasons for it. I think the actual reason, I'll explain why I think it is what it is. But red could be like red letters, like the red letters in scripture are Jesus' words, right? That could be one.
Oh, yeah.
Red names in Eastern culture, like if you write a name in red in China or in Japan or whatever, it's an ill omen, or it's like you do that for dead people. Although Buddhism sees red letters as divine, there's also a potential reason that, like, okay, maybe all scholiasts have everything written in red because red doesn't photocopy well. So they have to copy everything by hand. And the way that they enforce that is because of the fact that they're writing everything in red. I hope that's the answer. I don't think it is.
That would be so cool.
I don't think it is. I think the actual answer is the fact that this is a reference to Book of the New Sun. Severian in Book of the New Sun, when he writes his account, is writing it in vermilion ink. And I think that it is potentially a reference to the fact that Severian does the same.
Gotcha.
So that is something we need to ask him. When we do our Empire of Silence interview with Christopher Rocchio, if he, God willing, lets us talk about it once per book or whatever, that's one of the questions we need to ask for sure.
That'd be cool. I also want to note here, I think it's worth mentioning, exaggerated startle responses are a symptom of PTSD. So when Hadrian is jumping really intensely to a seemingly harmless stimuli of her asking a question, it suggests that he has incurred some traumatic experience from the Collosso, which is implied, obviously, but some people respond differently to trauma. It seems like it's really affected him. My understanding is that when the brain becomes traumatized, it becomes less able to distinguish between dangerous and not dangerous stimulus. And so you start startling at things that you wouldn't otherwise be startling because it's interpreting far too many things as dangerous. So her sneaking up and asking a question has him responding by reaching for a weapon, right? So suggests he was deeply affected, like seriously. He's traumatized by Collosso.
He apologizes to her after it. So I'm sorry, she forgives him, and she asks again, repeats the question, "Did you know him?" And he's like, "Yeah, I knew. I didn't know him particularly well. Like, I'd fought with him a few times, but he wasn't like a friend. You sort of get used to this feeling." So he's sort of laying out the PTSD for her. She is interested in what this is like, particularly because there's like the voyeurism that I mentioned earlier of his life. And Hadrian also being self-aware in this moment and knowing that he's drunk is still holding back, because her detachment and fascination with how things feel as a myrmidon in the pit disgusts Hadrian the Palatine. There's this deep frustration and anger and disgust with the way, now that the veil has been lifted from him and he sees it from the other side, the way the Palatines deal with the myrmidons, they'll never understand, he sort of says. He also says, "I'm not a religious guy, but I thank heaven that it wasn't Switch or Polino in that Collosso in that night, because it could have been them." So this Jaffa guy, this is really dangerous.
Yeah.
It could have been Switch or Polino that died. Anais then says, he fought bravely though. And Hadrian in the moment's like, yeah, he fought bravely. And then in his mind, it's like, he didn't fight, he didn't do it for bravery. Bravery isn't the reason he was there. He needed money. That was the reason that Erdro was in Collosso. Nothing more.
Yeah. He keeps having these internals of how terrible it is, and then he says, "Yeah, you get used to it. I didn't know him that well." He's saying things he doesn't mean to keep the mask on, right?
Yeah.
And to try to not slip.
I mean, what he says is true, right? You do get, I don't know. Maybe that's him lying to himself, that he's actually not used to this, and how it's he has a deep, deep dissatisfaction and anger with the situation and how it works. But it's a reality.
I think he openly says that it's not exactly what he would want to say, because she said, "What's it like? I can't imagine." And then he said, "Though I was somewhat drunk by the time, I knew enough to hold my tongue." And
Yeah, he holds back a little bit, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So he's saying a sanitized answer,
yeah,
but there's also an aspect of that's the way he kind of should feel,
yeah, right, right, right,
right?
right. Yeah,
He then goes into this morose situation, thinking about like comparing this situation up in the box and how his failure last time he was in a box was so visible. Like he doesn't want to screw up in the situation, and so that's why he's sort of holding back. She offers to, seeing that he's upset, it's like trying to console him, but we can make you a gladiator if you want. Which, if you're looking at it from her perspective, she's trying to give him something here to make him feel better, right? I don't think this is a power play. I think this is a genuine thing,
yeah,
like
yeah.
trying to make you feel better.
Yeah, she doesn't get it.
And from a situation of it being soft, right? He if he's a gladiator, he's not going to die. He'll be fine, right? He'll be just, the suit will go down in the worst case scenario.
Yeah,
And Hadrian immediately takes the implication of like, and kill my friends?
Yeah.
No, of course not. Black Earth, no. And
Yeah.
he remarks that I said that probably too loudly, and she's probably taken aback. Like,
yeah. He
he
loses
basically
his
said,
temper.
"Fuck no." Yeah, yeah. It cursed at her in
Yeah.
her own box, which is crazy.
Yeah. So once again, he is not managing his emotions. He's suppressing them. And
Yeah.
you can't suppress them forever. They will come out somehow. And we're seeing that here is that this has crossed the line for him and he can't contain it. Right. It's also the case, that, potentially the trauma of the situation, it sometimes evokes intense responses like this. And so it can actually affect people's ability to manage responses like this. So people get upset very quickly sometimes with PTSD. So it's possible that that's also playing into this. But I think it's also just like, his values. Like he just is disgusted by the whole thing. Now, having been on the other side, the idea of being Crispin cutting down Switch, he just can't handle it. And
Yeah.
it's too much for him to suppress even.
Yeah, he also mentions, right, like he almost sees Crispin shooting Erdro
Yeah.
in the Collosso.
Yeah.
So he's attributing them with that as
Yeah.
well. He regrets going to see Elson at this point. He wishes he didn't give up on his friends. Like he feels like the fool. He slaps the wine off of the rail. It falls down through the field and hits the killing floor and breaks. And that's where he ends the chapter. And we begin the last chapter of our episode, this session, chapter 46, The Doctor. So at this point, there's a time jump, and Hadrian is presumably tutoring these kids in Jaddian consistently. So this isn't the first session that they've had. At this moment, he still thinks that his heritage is a secret to them, or he's not sure, but he believes at this moment that like they don't know who he really is. He also, the veil has been lifted from his standpoint. He's just not one of their friends anymore. He's not just a language tutor. He knows something deeper is going on. Why keep him for just this? I mentioned earlier that his possessions from Collosso are brought to him later, right?
Yeah.
This is where it actually happens in the narrative. And as he's leaving this session with the Mataro kids, he passes by an umand, their skin cracking in the air. So another indication that they're sea creatures is they probably are drying out a little bit being on land.
It's just not humid enough for them. It's just too dry or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he then thinks about the cruelty of actually using umand for a bunch of this stuff. Like using the umand as labor is a status symbol thing. Like they're carrying the statue. He looks at it and is like, you could have just used a lift pallet to like get that over there. Like, why do you have to use?
Yeah.
This is a 1 or 2 man job. You're using these coloni to do it in a less efficient manner.
Funnily enough, the scene that leapt into my mind here is a Dune scene. I don't remember if you recall this scene, is like the Harkonnens just abusing water in the palace for just to be needlessly cruel as a demonstration of power for the Fremen.
Yes.
So that's what leaped into my brain with this, is like the cruelty as display of power kind of thing is what came to mind here for me.
Yeah. The part where they just let water drip on the floor and somebody gets paid by like filling it up. Yeah, it's so cruel. And it's kind of the same vibe. He also mentions that it's a status symbol because they have Xenos where a lot of other colonies don't, right?
Yep.
A lot of the places don't. Their wealth is in the fact that they have these weird Xenobites. Anais catches up to him as he's leaving. Hadrian remarks at the fact that he thought that they were sorry. I thought we were done with our, lesson for the day. He remarks at the fact that she's taller than him. She's like a head taller than him. So we get the vibe that she's cut from the same sort of kind of marble that his mother's side of the family, the Kephilos side, that's taller. It's where Crispin gets a lot of his like height and stuff like that size. She's also the same way. She's very tall in comparison to him, like a head taller than him. She says, yes, sorry. I know that we are, but I just wanted to see you. This is another indication of like, she's really wanting to get to know him more than normal. And she indicates so because she invites him to this huge boat race, like this huge big deal socially. Another sort of bread and circuses moment. You can imagine the vibe I sort of got was like if somebody invited you to a horse race in which they were hosting, right? Like I'm taking you to the Preakness.
Yeah.
Something like that.
It's like, come check out this yacht race that we're going to.
Let's go to the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
Yacht racing. Yeah.
Just like it like just oozes privilege and royalty.
Wealth.
Yeah.
And she's like, of course, this isn't as big as Dorian's Ephebia will be. Like, that's going to be the biggest thing in the next 10 years or whatever, but it'll be big. And she's like, other Palatines are going to come up. And she immediately like wraps her arm around his. He looks at the sailcloths of these ships as they're walking by. They're adorned with imagery, apocalyptic imagery that we've seen before. Dragons, manticores, like these creatures that are ill portents. And Hadrian asks about sailing. It's like, is this a big deal here? And you can imagine that's another world building thing that Rocchio thought about too, because Delos doesn't have tides. So it's really calm. It's probably not very windy there either, but like the tides are a big part of why like ships move. And on a tideless planet with no moon, sailing is probably not that big of a deal. And she's like, yeah, of course it's a big deal. It's huge. It's going to be fun. Any of the ships will be honored if I'm on there. And I'll let you escort me on these ships too. Like this, I'll give you this privilege of being my escort on these famous ships. It'll be so much fun. So clearly there's something going on here, ulterior motive wise. Like she's being really, really touchy-feely with him more than would be expected. As they walk around the corner, he hears the droning of the Umand and one of the boxes. And we get this passage that I wanted to read.
We have to read it, yeah.
We have to read it. It's so important. It says, then a voice, the voice, first broke upon my universe. There are moments, reader, instants that divide, fracture time into time before and time after. I did not know it then, but my life had changed and changed forever that day beneath the Emeshi sun. No, damn it, you're doing it wrong. A single sentence and one so characteristic for her. I peered around the sandstone pillar of a colonnade and out onto the balcony that overlooked the parade ground with its swaying date palm trees. In a few months' time, Dorian Mataro's Ephebian triumph would begin there, processing through the streets along the canals of the city and Colosseum, where at last the Stiels and Machisom would be sacrificed to celebrate the majority of the son of the planet's lord. 3 Umand were attempting to replace light fixtures in the ceiling, their cilia struggling to manipulate the tools and electronics meant for the 5-fingered. Even as I turned the corner, one dropped a huge fluorescent rod, shattering the bulb to dust. One of the duellators, a fat man in a house uniform of muddy green, slammed his shock stick into one of the creature's legs. It went to 2 knees, dropping tentacles to brace itself. The human screamed, fucking squid tree-looking filth. Off to one side, his companion twiddled the dials on one of the drowning boxes used to communicate with the Umand. The man pulled his stick back for another blow, and suddenly there she was, her tattooed hand closing around the man's wrist. Go ahead, try it. Her voice rang out, warm and clear, richly accented. Hearing it, I recalled the tattooed doctor from the Uranusir on my faithful trip away from Delos, Tavarosi. That is one of the biggest introduction scenes that we will have as we meet this very, very important character in the book. So the Umand are replacing lights. One of them drops one of the fluorescent lights. The duellator hits it with a stun wand, or stun baton, and this woman grabs his hand and says, don't do that anymore. And the voice that we get here reminds Hadrian of the doctor that put him under in Fugue, who was covered in tattoos, who was Tavrosi. And Anais immediately recognizes this person and walks up to her and says, Dr. Onderra, how are you? Like, what's going on? Onderra at this moment is operating the drone machine and not like the guard immediately bows. She's operating the machine, trying to communicate to the Umand, and does not defer to Anais like you would expect to. She says, oh yeah, like everything's good. Like I'm just helping out with the brownouts that happen with the storms and all this different stuff. Hadrian like tries to enter the situation himself and says brownouts. And we get reminded of something that we saw from the perspective of the streets. We saw the lights go out at the palace
Yeah.
during the major storm that Hadrian survived with Cat his first night. And so it's like, the generators are on the fritz. And this Tavrosi woman looks to Hadrian and says, yeah, that happens sometimes. Things break, Mr. And he's like, Hadrian Gibson. Anais introduces him to her. This is Hadrian Gibson. And then let's read this description of her as well on page 310. She was nearly as pale as I was myself, a sailor's pallor, though so white and unblemished that I decided her skin must be proof against solar radiation like my own. In high boots and simple trousers, she looked drab next to Lady Anais Mataro in her flowing caftan, but she wore them proudly as any queen. Her arms were bare to the shoulder and left tattooed in a dense intaglio of fine black lines, whorls, and angles, spider webbing from the deltoid down to the start of each finger. Still smiling, she moved forward, extending her right hand, which entirely lacked tattoos, and took my hand in hers. Valka Onderra vad Edda, Xenoologist. I don't know how I responded, though. I guess I'd say the correct thing, for Valka smiled again and said, lovely to meet you. I'm no great artist, though she made me wish I was. I could not have known that at that first meeting how many times I would fail to capture her in charcoal and in ink. The simple brazenness of her, the proud tilt of that upturned chin, the pointed nose, the devil-may-care way she carried herself, well above the petty concerns of lesser men. There is but little sign of her wit, so close to cruelty, in any of the sketches I have made of her, nor can this poor prose contain her beauty, body, or soul. Whoa, dude.
Yeah. So
whoa.
Just pause it, because we need to take a big slam on the brakes here. So number one, this is Valka. It's been mentioned several times at this point. Number two, early in the story, we thought Hadrian was down bad for Kyra. This is not even in the same universe as Down Bad. This is completely batshit crazy, like blown away, right? This introductory chapter, or this introductory paragraph with her, where he has this moment where he says, and then a voice, the voice, and talks about, in the original text is slightly different. He said his world was cloven evenly in two from this moment. This idea that like there was life before and after what happened here. And the thing he's pointing out is just meeting this person. So once again, this is a thing that Rockio does very well, is, this idea of a coincidence becoming sort of life-changing. And when I think of moments of like in my life, I met my wife at a birthday party I didn't know she was going to be at, for example. Just random nonsense. And I now have a child in a home with her and we're married, right? And so just like this weird like coincidence that is just cascades across someone's whole life. That seems like the way he's describing this as he first just randomly meets this person, is that it is a massive deal that he happened to meet her. And in conjunction with the fact that we've seen him mention her earlier in the story without context, and him just talking about the sort of longing, even in the present, for this person, is extremely interesting and should be like highlighted in everybody's mind as extremely important moving forward.
Multiple drawings. Like he drew one, maybe two pictures of Kyra. Multiple drawings of this woman in charcoal and in ink. Like, this person is important. And it's also, you know what? I didn't realize until right now. We've heard no drawings of Anais Mataro. The moment we meet this person, I have drawn this person infinitely more times. So we get the instant, like, this person will continue on with the story. And because we're paying close attention, we know that this person will impact him a healthy amount.
And it's not just that he draws this person a lot. It's that he's like, it's never enough. He can never do it justice. It's just this, he can't even express how important this person is to him, is the vibe he's giving off. He can't even even with his words, can't describe what this person means to him.
So the name Valka is of Slavic origin. It potentially means it's strong, healthy, or vigorous. Valka could be a diminutive of Valentina. I'm not sure. I think it's actually potentially a reference to Robert E. Howard's Call the Conqueror, like worships the god Valka.
Interesting. I
So
didn't
I
know that
think
yet.
it's
I haven't read Cole yet.
probably where he got the name. We'll have to ask him that as well.
It also, I mean, frankly, the strong, vigorous, I mean, this all matches the personality here. So,
yes.
yeah.
Very much so. She mentions that she's a xenologist, right? So she studies the Xenos. She's dealing with the Xenos the moment that Hadrian meets her for the first time. And that's part of the reason that he's enamored with this woman from the moment he meets
Yeah.
her. Because he's fascinated with Xenos. He mentions the fact that she's not pretty. Like she's pretty, but she's not pretty in a Palatine way. Like she's got any Palatine could point out her myriad imperfections, but like I loved every single, like her hips were too big and I like that. And like, the way that her hair, like her lips, like, he's in love with this woman at first sight.
Yeah.
Or at least narrator Hadrian is.
Yeah.
And he mentions her eyes and says her eyes were golden, a golden that I'd never, like I hadn't seen and I had never seen since. Those eyes, I will never forget them. And you could just imagine him in this moment. He's dumbstruck looking at this woman and he waits too long to respond. And then he asks, do you work with the Umand? And then you could just vision like a dumb teenager. Like, oh, I'm so stupid. Why did I ask that dumb question? Of course he works with the Umand.
As she's working with the Umand.
Yeah, exactly. It's so dumb and so relatable. So relatable.
Yeah.
I love, just as a note, I love the fact that like he is not smooth with women. Like I love that about him in this such endearing way because he could totally lie here and be like, oh, I was the debonair suave. Like he's been particularly forthcoming, at least it feels like it on the page, with how Kyra went and now with how he is dealing with this situation. This one's heartwarming in that like that's a very relatable thing for young men to, or I guess young people to experience of like, why did I ask that question? It's so dumb and so obvious.
Yeah.
But it indicates he likes her. He likes her a lot.
Yeah, he doesn't even know what to do with himself, right? This is like too much woman for him.
Yeah.
Like it's like a perfect storm for him not to be able to cope with it. Like she's over here like hanging out with the Umand. She's like stopping the guy from hitting the Umand. She's a xenologist. It's like he walked into his dream girl in accident. It's a freaking...
You and I have talked about like what a potential adaptation for this would look like. This scene I picture being so good. I picture the scene being so like this. You could cut a lot of different scenes from the series or whatever. This scene has to be in the movie or the TV show and this exact same way.
Yes.
It's the perfect introduction. So he asked her some other questions. He's like, yeah, I typically work on the southern continent. Hadrian's like, I didn't know there was a southern continent. We find out that capital from Norman times was actually housed on the southern continent. Maybe a Dune reference potentially, the fact that like the Harkonnens weren't at Arakeen, they had it at a different place. Maybe it's a reference to that. I don't know. Valka immediately turns to Anais. Is like, your companion is not from here, you see? And the reason I'm doing this sort of Russian accent is that's because the audiobook does the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I'm getting that. I'm interested to hear what he would think she sounds like. But it also gets this feeling of like Valka is addressing Anais as if Hadrian's like, a subordinate or a pet, which he kind of is. And Anais is like, no, he's not from here. He's from Two Crows, and he was a Myrmidon. And then Valka's eyes are like, he's a Myrmidon, huh? He mentions the fact that Tevrosi hate blood sports.
Well, initially, she doesn't know that he was a Myrmidon. Right?
Yes. So she says Myrmidon on the page, and then she's like, oh, so you enjoy killing slaves, huh? And then, so that distinction becomes really important in the context here. Let's see, on 312, but before we get there...
He fought in Collosso for a year. And so she, at least in my version, does not say he was a Myrmidon
really?
at first. Yeah.
Okay, so mine says, this is a difference. So it says, no, he's from Two Crows. He was a Myrmidon. Did you know? Fought in the Colossus for a year.
Well, there is that there. Okay. But she doesn't understand the custom because they don't have blood sport. I see.
Yes. She doesn't see the distinction between Myrmidon and Gladiator that we've talked about before.
That's right. Okay.
He mentions that, I remembered briefly that the Tefrosi don't like blood sport. She immediately goes cold to him and it bothers him. Like this whole description that you just had, like as somebody who hates being in trouble, like that's my one biggest thing is like, if I'm in trouble, I'm not in a good place. And I recognize that about myself. Like I hate that. It's an oldest child thing. Like, I don't know, just the way I was raised. If I'm in trouble, I'm not doing well. He feels viscerally the fact that she's going cold to him, hearing this information about him fighting in Collosso, and it bothers him. And it bothers him that it bothers him so much. And he's like, why does it bother me so much? She asks if he enjoys killing slaves for his masters. And then on 312, it took me a moment to realize the woman was speaking to me. I had forgotten my assumed name. When her words hit me, they did so like a blow to the liver. But then she was Tavrosi. They did not have Collosso in that strange and distant country, nor slaves. They had sim games and mandatory public work, and a peace maintained by therapy and re-education, protest where we had order, chaos where we had peace. They discouraged families so much that the long associations between couples were disrupted by their mongrel state, and they committed the greatest of abominations, mingling their flesh with that of machines. Deciding that she had not understood the Myrmidon gladiator distinction, I said, I fought with the slaves, my lady, against the gladiators. Whoa.
Yeah. The description of Tavros seems super interesting on the outset. It gives me like a Brave New Worldy kind of vibe, with like the lack of ability to have like traditional couple relationships and like utopian kind of vibe feeling to it. It's very Brave New Worldy.
Utopian, borderline socialistic, communistic, not in a totalitarian, like
it's not authoritarian,
Stalinistic authoritarian state, but rather for the social wellness.
That's exactly right. It's like being crushed by like the utopian vision with purportedly good intentions, but really bad consequences is kind of the feeling, rather than like gulags. It's a different negative consequence, but it's interesting.
But they have protest, right? Like they allow protest, they have chaos. Like it's an interesting dichotomy of society, a more communal society, but also a more like structured in such an authoritarian way, at least as it relates to like re-education, right? When I hear the term re-education, it's never a good thing.
I agree.
You get sent to a camp, right? And you don't want to get sent to that camp.
No, you do not.
But they have sim games too. It's like a very, very interesting term. I want to find out more about these people. But he mentions to her at the end, like, I was on the side of the slaves, and she's like, oh, well, that's better than the other way around.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm not a lady. And she calls, like, she turns around and like starts dealing with Umond again because the duelators are being idiots, and she's like amateurs, and then starts muttering in a Tavrosi dialect and says a few words that Hadrian catches, one of them being Imperials and the other one being barbarians. Anarayak. Barbarians, was it? I dusted off my Tavrosi languages, cracking my metaphorical knuckles. We're flipping back to chapter 6 in this. Yeah. In chapter 6, the chapter which he leaves Collosso, he mentions, this was the Collosso, the great sporting event of the empire, and it was a bloody thing. First the baiting of the Ashdark, then this melee, and a chance for the conquering heroes to get their blood up. Then the smaller bouts, champion against champion. And first among those battles would be Crispin, the young and dashing son of their lord, resplendent in his finest armor, gallant with his bright sword and stylish hair. The whole thing struck me as perverse in that moment. Perhaps the ancients were right. Perhaps Valka was. Perhaps we were barbarians. We are barbarians. I wanted away. I wanted back in my rooms at Devil's Rest. He mentions the fact that she doesn't like Collosso on chapter 6 of this book, and we see it in the introduction of this character here.
Yes.
So we didn't know who Valka was. Now we know that Valka is this super important character to him, and we know that she calls these Imperials barbarians, and the word for that in her Tavrosi dialect is Anaraya. Genius.
Yeah, it's so good. The mentioning of this character before she exists for us in the story, it's just real. It makes this story rereadable and feel like a real work from a in-universe author, because they're pulling things from their own experience as they rewrite their narrative. They're writing the narrative with all of the experiences they've already had, and so we get drip-fed, and then we get these interesting reveals. And so in the moment, we know that this character isn't just someone who's making Hadrian fall for her. We know that something happens. We don't know exactly what happens, but we know that they have some kind of long-term thing going on, whether that's friendship or whatever it is, because he talks about her. He clearly knows about her views on things, and like he has taken her views to things to heart at some level. Like maybe her opinions were right about some things. It's interesting.
And to be interesting too, back to the in-universe document side of things, maybe she's known to the audience who would be reading this text.
That's a good point. Yeah, because
like maybe she's associated with him in some form or fashion, or the legend that is around him, so that when he drops the name in chapter 6,
they know it. We just don't know it as the reader, but the universe knows it. Yeah,
exactly.
That's correct. Yeah,
genius.
Yes.
So he immediately, listening to these words, he's like, the Tavros speak a bunch of languages. Let me try this one. And it's one of the two that he knows. He tries it and he starts to talk to her in this one dialect, asking how this translator device works. Her ears perk up and she's like, I haven't heard that ever. And so she responds she kind of tests him. She's like, goes in a different dialect and responds in a language, one that you can tell that she suspects he doesn't know. And then Hadrian switches to the only other one that he knows, Pantai. He says, I don't understand anything you just said. Can you say it again? And at that point, Valka cracks and smiles. Meanwhile, the woman that's taller than him, a head taller than him, and holding the keys to his golden cage is shocked at this situation. Like, do you guys already know each other? She feels put out by this conversation. Like, this is a very electricity between these two people, and there's a third wheel here.
Yeah.
The one that's bringing Hadrian to the dance, that is feeling very, very left out. So she's kind of pouty. And Valka says, no, but it's very surprising that, this imperial barbarian happens to know one Tavrosi language, much less two. And Hadrian sort of straightens up and says, I'm not most imperials.
I'm a Hadrian Marlowe. Hadrian Gibson. I'm Gibson.
Yeah, exactly. Then she explains to us, the audience, that Bimon don't think like we do. They're not individuals. They're more like a neural lace, he mentions. And at hearing neural lace, Hadrian and Anais are like, what does that mean? And Hadrian's trying to play it off cool, I know exactly what you're talking about. Anais is like, what's a neural lace? And Hadrian's like, oh, no subtlety at all. And she explains that each human is like a cell. Like, the droning is not a language. It is networking between these two cells or multiple cells. And this term, Hadrian the narrator mentions, is a data sphere term that he doesn't fully understand. That he understands this technology thing as little as understanding as a dog has of human mating rituals, which I felt that one deep down to my core, if I'm being honest. But he gets the point of they share consciousness, and she's like, not quite, but kinda, they're close, they harmonize, right? So they're talking about the way that the Xenos work, and Anais is like, I don't care about any of this, but she does a decent, polite job of trying to insert herself back into the conversation and say, how long are you in town, Dr. Onderra? Please let it be 3 days so I don't have to talk to you anymore. She's like, oh, I'll be out of here when the storm season's over, when storms pass. The ruins, Caliga gets put underwater. And Hadrian has heard of Caliga before in the narrative, and he's like, oh, are those the ruins? And Anais turns to him and is like, I'm surprised you don't know about that. And Valka's like, yeah, they are really old. They're pre-human. They're thousands and thousands of years old. Hadrian asks, it's like, well, who built them? Is it the Umand? He's thinking to himself, the only thing that he's seen the Umand make are lean-tos, potentially on land or underwater. And Valka says, that's the best idea that we have at the moment. But then again, extinction catches most of the races that exist in the galaxy. We're not the oldest race in the galaxy. We just happen to get off planet. Most races die to extinction before that happens. And Hadrian remarks, oh, so the arch builders that are on Ozymandias, which perks Valka up. It's like, yes, like them. But Caliga is older, much, much, much older. The arch builders have only been gone for 4,300 years. And they both say 4,300 years at the same time, because he's so into this. He's like, sorry, I'm kind of an amateur enthusiast myself. She's like, well, some of us earn money doing this. And Gibson, if you're really interested, you can stop by my quarters later if you're not too busy killing people. And just jabs him at the very end. It's beautiful. She's so good. She's the best.
Yeah.
She's walking away and he says, it's nice to meet you. And she's like, I'm sure it was. Bye-bye.
My feeling is it's just, when I'm reading this, first of all, it's so cool to read this again. It's so cool on a second read. You have to experience it. If on the second go around, this is so cool. But this is just the moment I'm like, oh man, Hadrian is so screwed, because she's assertive and knows what she wants and is just this is just trouble. It's so his autonomy is out the window. This is just, And now he's got to like go back to her quarters to look at hollows of Collosso. Now he's screwed. He's totally screwed. It's perfect. It's just it's just perfect. It's such a perfect scene.
And at the moment, Anais is completely forgotten he's holding her arm during this whole conversation or whatever. She's like totally forgotten this entire thing. He can't even think about her. And he mentions, I had no response for her and simply stood there watching her depart. Anais Montaro on my arm, completely forgotten, entirely forgotten. The lights the Umand had installed on the balcony flickered on, and for a long moment, the only sound was their droning and the swaying of the high date palms in the garden. That moment remains forever etched in me, imperishable. I remember everything, the sounds of the city, the touch of the sweltering wind, her retreating back. She had vanished round the corner before I returned to myself and looked around at Anais. Dumbstruck. That was the word. He is done for.
Yeah.
Right. So we know now this person has had an outsized influence on Hadrian's story and life, and we will see her. She will make a bigger splash in his story going forward. She will change his mind about some things. They will have arguments, like they will have conversations, and he obviously thinks this woman is beautiful and is all the same interests. Seems perfect for him. She seems totally disinterested in him right now. And I love that.
It's
She's
fantastic. Yeah, it's great. I'd also add, all of these sections describing are updated with the prose of your version, and they're polished up. So it's worth, folks, if there's a difference. The special edition has this cool prose that Cam's using, so it's cool. This section in particular is just very special, and it's once again another gigantic question mark for us as the reader is experiencing it for the first time. Is like, what is this person that is so important to us, and how on earth is this going to turn out?
Yeah. Well, I hope to find out sooner rather than later. We've gotten a lot dropped in our last few episodes, but we'll see it all come and coalesce together as we continue always forward.
And always down.
And we will see you folks next time.
See you folks.
Devil's Wrist Book Club is Cameron Elston and Drew Welty. Today's episode discussed chapters 44, 45, and 46 of Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio, copyright 2018. Empire of Silence was originally published by Daw Books on July 3rd, 2018. Quality editing and original music by Cameron Elston. Find us on YouTube. Contact us at devilswristbookclub@gmail.com. Devil's Wrist Book Club is a production of Disquiet Pods. This episode, copyright 2026, Cameron Elston and Drew Welty. Thank you, and remember, rage is blindness.